morning I want to talk about the worthy life. I was reading about that this week from Philippians chapter 1, verse 27, reading some lessons from it, some material from it, and it really struck home. I want to start by reading Philippians chapter 1, verse 27. Paul writes, "Only let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of your affairs, that you stand fast in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel." What is implied in that exhortation? When you look at the Greek word that is translated worthy, it's often translated in other places in the New Testament as in keeping with. And like a lot of other words in the New Testament, especially in the Greek language, there's a picture that's behind this Greek word axios. And it means properly bringing up the other beam of the scales, bringing into equilibrium, equivalent. We have what's called triple beam balances in my science lab, and what you do, you put your weight on one end of the scale and then you move the weights on the other side until it what? Balances. That's the word here that's translated worthy. So the basic idea here is that a life that's worthy of the gospel is expressed in the lifestyle that matches the gospel. That's what it is. So such a life takes on this character of Christ. I remember growing up going to the old MFA grocery store in Neosho. Some of you may have went there too when you were young. I don't remember, but there was a scale there back in the meat department. And the butcher, whoever was working behind there, would, if you say, "I want a pound of hamburger," you would see the butcher putting it on, and just till it got to right at a pound. And so what you got was a pound that was worthy. This was worthy of being a pound. That hamburger you got. That's the idea of living a life worthy of the gospel. So what you have here, you have the gospel on one side, you have your life on the other. You want them to balance. And when they balance, it's worthy. Now that is one of the most important concepts taught in the New Testament. It's not the only place that Paul mentions it. It's not the only place that some of the other writers mention it. But it's an extremely important concept for Christians to grasp. We are called, just like this says, we're called to live this worthy life. This equivalent life. The life that's set forth in the gospel. That's how we need to live when we go outside those doors. People outside the body of Christ, people in the world need to see us living a worthy life. One that is in keeping with the gospel. It matches the gospel. It's equivalent to the gospel. Now that is what one writer called, I read this week, the balanced Christian life. When we have the gospel on one hand and our life on the other, and they balance, that's the balanced Christian life. That's how we're supposed to live, and that's how the world needs us to live. And when we live that balanced Christian life, the world's going to want what we have, because we are living differently. For Paul, it was not a small issue. He also says in this same verse, when he starts, "Only let your conduct," that in the original language comes from a word that basically means be a citizen of. Be a citizen of. We're called to be citizens. We're supposed to be citizens. Paul says you need to live your life as a citizen. Now, he could have here lived or used the word walk, like he does in Ephesians, where we're going to go in a moment. But he didn't. That's not the word he used. He used walk in Colossians 2, but not here. He's writing to Christians in Philippi. Philippi was a Roman colony. And so those people who lived in Philippi were citizens of the Roman Empire. And I think that's probably why Paul used that expression here, because people in Philippi knew all about what it meant to be a citizen of the Roman Empire, because with it there were responsibilities and with it there were blessings. And so Paul uses that expression here. Live your life as a citizen. Not as a citizen of this world, but as a citizen of heaven. Only let your conduct be a citizen that's worthy of the gospel. Again, as we walk out the doors, we need to remember who we are. We're citizens of the kingdom. That's who we are. And with that, that brings a lot of responsibilities in how we react, how we act with people, and how we treat people, and who we're companions with, all of that. So being a citizen is extremely important for Christians in how we live, because we have tremendous responsibilities. Just like those citizens in Philippi did in the first century, we have responsibilities to be the right kind of citizen. No, we don't think of ourselves as being citizens in this world, because we're not. We're citizens of a greater world. We are citizens of heaven. And so it's like heaven on earth. Maybe that's a good expression. I borrowed that one too. Heaven on earth. So when we live as citizens of the kingdom, it's as if my Christian life is a version of that. It's a version of living as heaven on earth. And what greater privilege could there possibly be than that? But with that, the standard couldn't be any higher either. It really couldn't. Because I'm supposed to be expressing what being a citizen of the kingdom is really like. I'm supposed to be expressing that in my daily living, because I want to be worthy of the gospel of Christ. We're certainly not teaching, and I don't want you to get the idea that, well, I have to do so many works to earn salvation. That's not what this is about at all. This is about, as a Christian, what it means to live a worthy life. You know, I think about Daniel in the Old Testament. You know, he was taken away from his homeland as a young man. He was transported across the world to live in Babylon, which was a horrible, ungodly, pagan world. But what did he do there? He lived as a citizen of the kingdom. For him, a citizen of heaven. And that meant a lot. Living as a citizen for him, no doubt, was difficult, but it is for us as well. You know, we need to live as a citizen of the heavenly Jerusalem while we're here in this worldly Babylon, because that's what our world is like. You know, our country certainly would not be described as a Christian nation anymore. When you look at all the atheism, the paganism, and everything else in our world, this is not where we belong. But just like Daniel didn't belong in Babylon, but while he was there, he lived as a citizen that God would approve of. So are we. That's what we're called to do. We are called to live as this citizen here in this world and express to people what it means to live a life worthy of the gospel. I love this phrase in Psalms 137 verse 4, that I think should be kind of our marching song. It says in Psalms 137 verse 4, "How shall we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill. If I do not remember you, let my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth. If I do not exalt Jerusalem above my chief joy." Singing the Lord's song in a foreign land. That's what we're doing right now in the world. As we live, that's what we're doing. We're singing the Lord's song in a foreign land. No, this isn't our home. We're pilgrims, just like the Apostle Peter says in his first letter. We're pilgrims. We're just traveling through this world. This is not our home. This is just where we are temporarily. But while we're here, we've got to show to the world what it means to live a life worthy of the gospel. So specifically, what does that entail? Briefly, I want to look at three things in Ephesians chapter 4 that I mentioned we were going to go to. Ephesians chapter 4, the first two verses tell us this. It says, "I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you to walk worthy," there's that same word, "of the calling with which you were called, with all lowliness and gentleness, with long suffering, bearing with one another in love." Just going to look at the first three of those. I wish we had time to go over all, but we don't. So first of all, lowliness. Sometimes it's translated humility. Humility is not thinking lowly of yourself. It's not thinking of yourself at all. Here's one quote that I think is worth remembering. True humility is not putting ourselves down, but rather lifting up others. If we concentrate on lifting up others, putting down ourselves will take care of itself. I want to go back to Philippians for just a moment. This time in Philippians chapter 2. In verses 3 and 4, he says, "Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind. Let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interest, but also for the interest of others." The New Living Translation says this: "Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too." So true humility, again, is not losing your stature. It's not losing your honor. It's lifting other people up. That's walking worthy. What else is it? It's walking with gentleness, he says. Here's one definition: enduring injury with patience and without resentment. Meekness denotes the humble and gentle attitude which expresses itself in a patient submissiveness to offense. It's free from malice and desire for revenge. It's controlled strength. It's the ability to bear reproaches and slights without bitterness and without resentment. It's the ability to provide a soothing influence on someone who's in a state of anger. It's the obedient submissiveness to God and his will. What a wonderful definition. Paul informs us, Titus chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, to always be gentle to everybody. Everyone. And then the last one is patience. In the Greek, this is a compound word from macro We know what macro means: large, big, a lot of. And thumia, which has to do with temper. So to be patient is to have a long fuse. In other words, it takes a long time and a lot for you to get angry. Barnes in his commentary says, no virtue perhaps is more frequently demanded in our lives with others than patience. Barclay writes, as the Greeks used it, it usually meant patience with other people. It's the ability not to lose patience when people are foolish. There's lots of those. Not to grow irritable when they seem unteachable. It's the ability to accept the folly, the perversity, the blindness, the ingratitude of men, and still remain gracious. Tough. Where does it come from, though? Paul said, and this is going to close our lesson, Paul says this in Romans chapter 5 and verse 3. And not only that, but we also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance. That's that word patience we just saw. If you pray to God you need more patience, expect Him to put you through some difficult times, because that's where we learn patience. Is through tribulations, trials, sufferings, difficulties. That's where we learn it. What have we learned? We've learned that we are called as Christians to live a life as citizens of the kingdom that's worthy of the gospel. When people see me, they need to see the gospel being lived out in this world. That's what they need to see in me. Do I fail at that? Of course I fail at that. The only one who ever did that perfectly was Christ. But our goal is to do that, is to live a life worthy. So that when they see me, just like Paul said in Galatians 2:20, they see Christ living in me. And I need to change every day so that people see less of me and more of Christ. That's living a life oxios, worthy of the gospel. Humility, gentleness, patience, and many of that will come through suffering, difficulties, and trials. So we don't want to just call ourselves a Christian. We want to live up to the name. That's what we want. We do that by becoming a Christian, just like those did 2,000 years ago by repenting and being baptized, but also by doing our best to living a life worthy of the gospel.